I want to mention two tools you might want to add to your weaving tools if you're going to do string heddle weaving. Now this is the Ojibway loom, which is warped with green crochet thread, a square roll bar, and string heddles. And you may want to add, especially with this loom, but also on another loom I'll tell you about in a moment. This is a weaving sword. This one is about 9 inches. I think I bought this with my ankle looms. And this is a comb. And I have weaving combs that you can generally find with Navajo weaving, but you can also buy fancy wooden combs or any kind of hair comb at a drugstore and use that. Now, the dog is right here next to me, so hopefully she's not going to interrupt. So when you do string heddle weaving, whether it's on a backstrap loom, this loom, or the other loom I was doing some weaving on yesterday that would also apply, you can look for the metal bead looms. I have them, excuse me, in 2-inch, 4-inch, and 6-inch wide. And I was working with the 6-inch wide metal bead loom, and you can do the same setup with that kind of a loom. You're limited with how long it is, and the 6-inch wide loom is about 9 inches long. But you can set it up the same way, and have another type of loom that'll do both beads and fabric. But when you're using string heddles, whether you're doing bead work or fabric work, on this loom or somewhat on the metal bead loom, when you pull up the string heddles, you need to really, first of all, you have to have your loom at high tension. You have to have it very tight. And you can see that I'm pulling up on that quite a bit, and yet I don't really have a huge shed opening. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing down on the loom. Now with a backstrap loom, you'd be pulling back and moving backwards so that you have a higher tension on the loom. But once you get it like that, and you don't really have to use your elbow, but I'm going to use it right now, you can push the loom down if you have to, and then get a weaving sword into the shed. Like that. Then you pull that up, and your shed is there for you to use the shuttle and put it through. I was actually doing the other direction. So then when you do the roll bar shed, so say you've done that, your roll bar comes forward and you stand it up, and you can see how it pushes the string heddles back, and that gives you an open shed. You push this through, and then when you push the roll bar back out of the way, you push your heddles back out of the way, you bring in a comb. And this is called packing. And you pack your weft really into the fabric. Now, this is acrylic worsted weight yarn and cotton size 10 crochet thread. And this is the type of fabric that's making. But now, if you imagine white cotton crochet thread and white hand-spun cotton, or gray crochet thread and gray natural wool, you are getting an extremely fine fabric that's well packed and solid. It's really a nice fabric. Now, because this is worsted weight, and you can see how thick it is, when I take this off the loom, it's expected that the blue is going to pop up more and push the warp aside a little bit, but you can't count on that. It will fluff up with washing a little bit, but you have to assume that what you get is what you're weaving. So now, what I also do, whenever I enter from the right, I pull the shed up, and whenever I enter from the left, I push the shed down. So I am at a string heddle shed, and this is where you might want to push your loom down, pull that up. Let me put the camera back down again. Pull that up as best you can, and it's easier actually on a backstrap loom. A lot of people that I've seen using Ojibway looms use their feet to keep the loom away from them a little bit. So there is the shed, and I bring the shuttle in from the right, and you can pack it with the sword, but see how that packs with the sword? You can't quite get it as far as if you pack it with a comb. So you may want to add a weaving comb and a weaving sword to your string heddle weaving. Now I will add here, I've been doing a little bit more weaving, and this sometimes happens. I missed a warp string that should have a heddle on it. I could add one, but because I've missed like 2 inches, 3 inches, I'm just going to cut that warp thread off when I'm done weaving, and it can just sit there while I'm doing this. But what I did was try a couple of things. I pointed the loom, and this is specifically the Ojibway loom. I pointed this like at a table or toward the floor, and I gripped the 2 side rails, which are actually 3-foot dowels, with my knees, and I can stabilize the frame, which makes pulling up on the string heddles a little bit easier. But here's another option, and that's this. This is an axe handle, but it's made out of hickory. It is a vintage axe handle. I think they still make them out of hickory. You might have to look around. It's a very heavy stick, and I'm going to hold the camera with my left hand for a minute, and just having the weight of that stick on there, when I go to pull up the string heddles, and then what I was doing a moment ago is my left hand actually is holding the stick down. I pull up the string heddles, and I can get that weaving sword right in there without a problem. See what a better shed that gives me? And that's just from the weight of a stick. And then if I wanted to, if I were sitting in a chair, I could put my knees over that stick, and then I have all the control I need. Now, I mentioned with the 6-inch wide metal bead loom, you can do the same thing. You can, and I said that you are limited by the size. That is the size of the loom and not the warp. I had a 5-foot warp on the 6x9 metal bead loom. And of course, because it has rollers at either end, you can roll the warp up. It's just that your working space is limited, where the Ojibway, you're only limited by the length of the dowels that you put in there. As far as a frame loom lifting up like that, any of the metal bead frame looms, you can use the same stick or the same idea. I was even thinking if I really wanted to, I could put a brick on here, and the loom's not going to move. This is almost as heavy as 2 bricks. And like I said, it's made out of hickory. Pine wouldn't do the same thing. But if you're going to backstrap weave or frame weave with string heddles, this kind of a tool is kind of a given. You find one. You end up finding one, even if you don't go out and buy one. It'll find you. The weight, this would make an ideal roll bar on a wide warp. It's heavy and yet 2 inches tall. But right now, it's sitting underneath the whole thing and just holding the frame in place. And this, being a lightweight pine or basswood, actually, roll bar, makes the perfect other shed. That's a wide shed. So the Ojibway loom, the other thing I was just thinking about when I was using the comb, now all weaving is going to pull in a little bit from where you start. I don't know how much the blue is going to full up or puff up when I wash this, but I'm fine with the green and blue the way it is. But when I was using the comb, combs are generally used in Navajo style weaving where, and this is now a whole nother use for either this or the metal bead looms, is tapestry weaving. Tapestry looms are usually frame looms that you put a straight warp on like this. But with Navajo rug weaving, they do use string heddles and a roll bar. But what they do is they work one section at a time. So a lot of, one of their traditional figures are people. They're they're different from like Egyptian style people, but they're somewhat similar. So they may work the people. One person here and then a building here or something. Or a snake or a thunderbird. So you can do that same kind of tapestry weaving with this. And in between each, they use bobbins. Long, skinny, pointed bobbins with the wool on it, go in and out of wherever they're working, pack it down with a comb, and then I believe put a straight weaving line through there, which again is similar to sumac rug weaving, where you keep the plain weaving involved even if you're doing tapestry. So I'm not sure if all Navajo rugs have the plain weave added. I know sumac rugs do, but that's kind of a knot thing. But you could do sumac, tapestry, bead weaving, and plain fabric weave on any simple frame loom like this that you can get a very tight tension on.